Greetings and welcome, I'm Ash, and today I would like to give you a bit of a preview for Guild Wars 2's Path of Fire expansion. Once it arrives later this month, it'll allow us to explore the vast regions of the Crystal Desert and the nearby kingdom of Elona, mess around with 9 new Elite Specializations such as the Spellbreaker or Mirage, fight against the human god of war Balthazar and his hordes of metallic minions, and, perhaps most importantly of all, ride a variety of mounts that all come with their own unique little effects and spells. While the most recent open beta featured only a tiny portion of what Path of Fire has to offer, the things I saw filled me with a great deal of hope for Guild Wars 2's future. So if you're interested in learning what the new content is all about, and how exactly the mount system differs from all of the other MMOs, allow me to give you my thoughts after quite a few hours with the open beta. Given their impact on gameplay, I would first like to talk to you about the mounts, or rather mount, singular. The open beta only allowed us to play around with Raptors, which I must admit was a great choice given how much work went into making them satisfying to ride. What I mean by this is that they are not only highly useful in terms of gameplay, but that their animations and handling are also top notch. When you press the mount up key, your Raptor will appear from below you and essentially swoop you up in a very fluid series of motions. When you try to turn a sharp corner, you will visibly see your Raptor struggle against his momentum before he finally manages to rotate. And perhaps most adorably of all, if you stand still for long enough, your character will eventually start petting the Raptor as if it was an overly large dog. And yes, this does include the erratic leg shake. As you can plainly see, this is just a couple of small examples that on their own don't really mean anything, but when combined, they make for some extremely polished and extremely satisfying riding. During the initial announcement, ArenaNet promised that Path of Fire's mounts would be more than simple speed buffs, and I am very glad to say that they were not exaggerating. The Raptor not only gives you the ability to quickly cross vast distances, but it also allows you to jump ridiculously far, something that can be upgraded even further through the mastery system. This is not only a great boon for anyone that likes exploration and searching for secrets, but it also allows ArenaNet to create entirely new types of challenges for players to overcome. What delighted me the most, however, was the ability to use mounts as a kind of a platform to jump higher, quite similar to how Mario uses poor old Yoshi. Unfortunately, you can't do this while jumping, so you won't be able to chuck your dinosaur into a pit in order to get slightly higher, but you can do it while walking, which gives you the ability to climb just about anything, if you're patient enough. Combine this with the fact that charging at your enemies and dismounting actually causes the Raptor to attack them, and you've got yourself a rather intriguing and rather unique mount system, one that I am very eager to explore further. While I would love to say that everything else is stellar and just call it a day, I'm afraid there are some issues I need to go over. The story in Guild Wars 2 has always been a bit on the mediocre side, which is a real shame since the lore itself is quite interesting and well worth a few hours of wiki exploration. In both Vanilla Guild Wars 2 and Heart of Thorns, pretty much all of the story missions are filled with waves upon waves of generic enemies and awkwardly paced dialogue. While the pacing has been significantly improved, this trend sadly continues into Path of Fire as well. Or at least the very first mission, as that's the only thing we've been given access to so far. Instead of it being a grand confrontation with the Herald of Balthazar, an enemy I assume is going to play an important role in the story, most of the introductory mission is spent fighting generic minions while the characters exchange meaningless threats. The dialogue is not so poorly written that I can mock it, nor is it so sublime that I can praise it to high heavens. It's just kind of there, and that's perhaps the most disappointing thing of all. This is not going to ruin Path of Fire for me, as I'll probably play for the story once and then forget it even exists, But it is really unfortunate to see that ArenaNet has still not managed to elevate the personal story above merely serviceable. Even though my first impressions of the new storyline aren't exactly spectacular, I am very excited to see where Path of Fire takes us, because the visual design has only gotten better and better over the years. So much so that the artists have somehow managed to make a desert appealing to look at and also interesting to explore. Naturally, it's not just a boring old desert filled with rough and irritating sand. There is actually a surprising amount of diversity when it comes to the terrain and cities. The ancient Egyptian/Arabian theme that permeates all of this might not be the most unique concept ever conceived, but I feel like it gives Path of Fire a certain air of mystery, which is always a good thing for games focused around exploration. How exactly this will hold up when we venture further into the Crystal Desert, I'm afraid I simply don't know. But everything shown so far was quite the sight to behold, so I can't exactly say I'm worried. Much like the architecture, the enemies I managed to face from my time in the Crystal Desert were a rather intriguing bunch. I saw roaming hordes of sentient cacti, metallic servants of Balthazar rollerblading across the desert dunes, and yes, I'm completely serious here, ancient genies that greatly remind me of the Exalted from Heart of Thorns, sand sharks that love to chomp on unsuspecting travelers, and perhaps most interestingly of all, a huge fire-breathing Hydra. The Hydra's heads sadly did not grow back as I chopped them off one by one, but they did continue spitting fire in my direction while flopping on the ground. The veteran version of this monster didn't really pose much of a threat, but I have a distinct feeling that Champion or even Elite Hydras are going to be one tough bastard to take down. And honestly, that is exactly how it should be given their rather impressive visage. There weren't that many quests and events present in the demo, but everything I did get to experience was pretty much exactly the same as in the original Guild Wars 2. The only real complaint I have with the system are the hard quests, those standard MMO grindfests, as they are just as tedious and just as boring as they were when Guild Wars 2 first launched. For example, in order to even unlock the Raptor mount, you will need to spend about 10 minutes running around the village and putting out fires while the NPCs simply stare at you, completely unfazed by the fact that their entire livelihood is being reduced to cinders all around them. These types of quests didn't really fit Guild Wars 2 when it first launched, and with all of the improvements made in Heart of Thorns and Living World Season 3, they are even more archaic than ever before. I can only hope they are going to be few and far between, because doing an NPC's chores is not exactly my definition of fun. On the positive side, the one new feature I did get to play around with, the bounty system, is a much better way of handling filler quests. Instead of forcing you to stand around one area cleaning someone else's problems, the bounty board simply tasks you with hunting down a dangerous enemy, gives you their rough location, and sends you off on your merry way. It's simple to understand, difficult to complete, and from what I could tell, it's also very rewarding. Chances are their appeal will fade after a while, but as far as side content is concerned, I feel that bounties are a pretty enjoyable compromise between time spent and rewards gained. The final thing I got to try out were the new Elite Specializations, of which the most interesting one to me was the Mirage, given that I poured in hundreds upon hundreds of hours into my Mesmer. And I didn't like it. Given how Mesmers are currently stuck being pretty much chronomancers in any serious content, I was hoping the Mirage would offer an interesting and team-oriented way to play as DPS, but sadly that is not the case. Its array of debuffs and spells are all seemingly tailored around PvP, and with basically no utility to speak of, there is simply no reason for me to ever stash my shield and venture into a more DPS-oriented role. As I mentioned earlier, it's probably going to find its place amongst the PvP crowd, but after waiting for years to get a reliable Mesmer DPS spec, I am very disappointed to see it sectioned off like this. However, while the Mirage was not exactly my cup of tea, I did have a lot of fun with some of the other ones. For example, the Thief's Deadeye is an absolute blast to play given that high range and high damage and high mobility is a recipe made in rifle heaven. Similarly, I greatly enjoy my time with the Elementalist Weaver specialization as it kinda feels like I'm playing Invoker, though I must admit I wasn't exactly impressed with the amount of damage I was dishing out. Then again, I didn't exactly put in a ton of time into the Weavers, so it's entirely possible that I just played it completely wrong. Whatever the case may be, the most important thing is that all of the new classes are fun to play, and from my limited experience so far, I can say that that is indeed the case. If you've enjoyed Guild Wars 2 throughout all these years, then Path of Fire is going to add a whole bunch more toys for you to play around with. But if you could never really get into it, then I'm afraid Path of Fire is simply not going to change your mind. If you ask me, however, I must admit I am quite looking forward to it. I mean, someone has to go and feed my Raptor. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. And with that said, I hope you guys have a nice day, and I'll see you soon. See ya!